Alright, so I just got back from seeing The Wolverine, and this is an interesting movie to watch, especially with all the cameos in there. That really maybe clouded my judgment a little bit too much. But before I get into the Wolverine, I got to talk about some of the trailers that I got. I wrote them down because these trailers, I only got like 4 trailers as opposed to the previous 10 that I got at everywhere else. But these trailers, 2 of them looked okay, and 2 of them not so much. The first trailer I got was Insidious 2. I haven't seen the first Insidious, but did it really need a sequel? I mean, especially considering that the sequel looks like the exact same movie, almost. I mean, it's kind of like The Hangover 2, like, oh, this is happening again. Or Die Hard 2. Or Home Alone 2, where I really... it might be good. Like I said, I've never seen the first one. But again, when I saw trailers and I heard feedback about the first one, it didn't really scream sequel to me. But the second one I got was Riddick, the new Riddick with Vin Diesel. First of all, Vin Diesel really needs to stop acting, or whatever he calls that, because honestly, he's worse than Stallone. I mean, he mumbles his way throughout every single performance. And this Riddick movie just looks like him going around fighting CG monsters. I mean, there's really nothing... I couldn't even tell what it was about. I mean, the guys in the trailer are talking to Vin Diesel. They're like, we need you to come in and kill these monsters. He's like, okay. And he just goes and kills the monsters. I mean, I don't really know what it's about. Honestly, it looks like one of the Underworld movies or the Resident Evil movies. That kind of mediocrity. But yeah, actually no. You know what it really reminded me of? It reminded me of Priest, and that's not a good sign. But with the digital monsters, the little digital monsters running around, and it being set in the desert. But Priest was a horrible movie anyway. Third trailer I got was for Elysium, that Matt Damon post-apocalyptic, or maybe not post-apocalyptic, but it's the Matt Damon future movie where he's trying to break into this space station / society whereby he hopes to cure what I can only assume to be radiation sickness that he contracts. And in order to break into the place, they give him this kind of bionic gear that honestly kind of looks like the equipment that Mickey Rourke sported in Iron Man 2. So I don't really know if that's going to come into play or not. But like I said, visually and in terms of acting, it looks fine. I mean it looks pretty solid, especially considering August. I mean, it looks like a cut above most August movies. Speaking of August movies, that brings me to the final trailer, which was for Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. Before I get into that, I have to say that I did read the Percy Jackson books, and they were good, but the movie, not really. I mean, the movie, in my opinion, was complete and utter garbage. Not because it didn't follow the book. I mean, there are people out there, fans of the book, who have sworn hate crimes against that movie because it didn't follow the book, and that's why it's bad. No, that's not why it's bad. It's bad because the characters were obnoxious. The effects look like they were from the early 2000s, and the acting was really, really weak. It was very amateur. The story was thin. I mean, it was just an all-around horrible movie, in my opinion. And the sequel looks worse. I mean, wow. I mean, the acting looks every bit as bad as the first one. I mean, you still got Logan Lerman in there, who instantly brings down any movie he is in. Instantly. I mean, he is... I really cannot stand that guy. He just has this presence and this style of acting that really makes you want to strangle him every time he's on screen. I mean, he's one of the bad things about the remake of 3:10 to Yuma. That he's one of the only bad things about that movie. I mean, every time he showed up, I just wanted Russell Crowe to shoot him in the head. But that would have actually made the movie interesting. But I digress. Speaking of James Mangold movies, we have the Wolverine. And yeah, it's... If you want my general opinion, it's good, but not great. I mean, it did have some problems. But first and foremost, the acting. The acting is fairly solid all around, and I think the biggest shout out I have to give in that category is to Hugh Jackman, who really sells it. I mean, he not only does he still act the part really well, but he is cut. I mean, he beefed up like Tom Hardy in Dark Knight Rises for this role. I mean, jeez. I mean, he is huge. I mean, he's still Wolverine. I mean, he still has it 13 years after he first donned the role. I mean, he probably has it for a few more years, honestly. I mean, he is that good. All the rest of the people, like, I'm blanking on the name. But it was as you would expect, it was mostly an Asian cast, because it basically takes inspiration from the comic book storyline where Wolverine goes to Japan and kind of learns the way of the samurai, and you basically see a different side to him that you wouldn't normally see. As for how well it follows the actual comic book, I couldn't really say since I've never read it, but as a fan of the character, it really does him justice. I mean, it's really, really good in terms of being a Wolverine movie. I mean, it actually succeeds more at being a Wolverine movie than the X-Men Origins Wolverine, which got a lot of flack for not only for its kind of weak story, but also for the really bad effects and the overload of characters. This one has a lot of characters too, but they never really feel like they're intruding on the main character, which is Wolverine. But as for the other actors, there's oh wow, I'm really gonna mispronounce some of these people. First of all, is Famke Janssen as Jean Grey. She comes back as Jean Grey, not in physical form. I mean, she's just kind of this apparition that comes to Wolverine in his dreams. Because as fans of the series will know, he kind of butchered her in X-Men 3. So a large part of the movie is him kind of coping with that. In fact, he starts out the movie really not wanting to partake in any violence, which I think is an interesting poses an interesting dilemma for the character, because the character is really known for his violence. What else? What else? What else? What else? Who else? Mariko Yashada, who is, as far as I know, is a character from the comic book. She's played by, I think, a model or a Japanese model named Tao Akamoto. You know, for being a model, she really kind of sells the performance. I mean, it's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but when you think of other models who have taken on acting, she's really a diamond in the rocks. I mean, like I said, it's not a great performance, but when she's sad, you can tell that she's sad. When she's angry, you can tell that she's angry. I mean, she sells it. The other main female in the movie is Ryla Fukushima as Yukio, who is another mutant. She's kind of this ninja chick with red hair. She really doesn't ascend in terms of what she has to work with. She doesn't really ascend past sidekick. But again, it's not really intrusive. I mean, she makes for basically a fairly likable supporting character. Again, she doesn't really have much to do. But again, she's likable when she's there. I would have liked to actually have seen a bit more of her in terms of development, because really we didn't really see much of her character. We saw more of Mariko than we did of her in terms of personality. So there was like 5 different bad guys in this one. And this kind of leads up to the movie's problems. But Hiroyuki Sanada as Shingen Yashada, Mariko's dad. He's honestly, he never really goes anywhere. At least nowhere of meaning. He kind of plays the two-dimensional action movie villain, kind of mean dad. But it never really goes anywhere. That there's not really any sort of character arc with him. Really, the biggest thing that happens to him is Wolverine kills him in a really cool fight. But that's about it. I mean, he doesn't really say a whole lot. He doesn't really have a whole lot of substance scripturally. So I wouldn't have missed him if his character had been cut. It may have made the movie a little bit more audience friendly in terms of script. But Will Yun Lee as Kenichi Harada. I've only seen Will Yun Lee in Hawaii Five-0, where he just played this kind of sleazy snitch who kind of helps them out periodically. And to be honest, he was really convincing in that role, and he's also very convincing in a completely different role as this kind of ninja archer. I don't really know why he uses a bow, and again, he doesn't really have a whole lot to work with. I mean, he really only has one singular goal in the movie. I mean, he doesn't really go through any kind of arc. I mean, another character that should have been cut. This movie could have been a lot more basic than it was. But Brian T. as Noburo Mori, who's this kind of minister guy. He has like 5 lines, if that. I mean, he's basically Mariko's fiance, by order of her dad, but he never really goes anywhere. He has like 5 lines. But ouch. The chick who plays Viper, I cannot pronounce her name, but and I'm not gonna insult her by trying. But Viper, she was probably the most fleshed out of any of the villains, and she's this kind of temptress who poisons people. That's actually how Wolverine loses his healing ability for a time in the movie. Like I said, her character leads to some interesting scenarios, but the character itself is not bad, but there could have been a lot more meat there. There could have been a lot more meat to a lot of the characters, but again, they're trying to cram a lot in here. In terms of plot, they're trying to cram a lot of story in here, and if they trim some of the story, then they could have trimmed some of the characters, and they could have had a better movie on their hands. But anyway, I digress. The action is very well done. I mean, I was actually surprised by how much I liked the action in this movie. I mean, not just the fight scenes, but also the stunt work, particularly by the ninja guys, and the samurai guys. They're these kind of ninjas and samurai guys in the movie. They're like running on rooftops. They're jumping from heights of 10 feet. You didn't really have a scenario where you were calling this movie out on that person would never survive that. I mean, as for the choreography and the stunt work and the injuries, it's very human in that way, where there's not really a whole lot of points where you don't buy that the characters could survive this. I mean, more so with. I mean, you kind of have to extend your disbelief, suspend your disbelief more with Logan because he has that healing ability, but all the rest of the characters, they have very human limits. And the majority, in fact, I think all of the action is practical effects, which was really a relief from a lot of the CG that was going around in X-Men First Class. And I did like X-Men First Class, but all those CG mutant powers got a little much. I mean, there's very little mutants in this movie. I think there's only like 3. And their powers are just kind of shown, and that's somehow, and the audience can basically, it's basically show, don't tell. The movie does not have to explain what this very limited number of mutants can do. They just kind of show it in reasonably subtle ways, so the audience can basically guess what these mutants can do for themselves, which I like that. I mean, but really, where the movie really falls apart is third act, and I'll get there, but I'm still talking about the good stuff. The story up until the third act is very solid. It basically deals with Logan and Mariko running around in Japan, and Logan basically rediscovering the, for lack of a better word, the Wolverine in him. So because at first he's very reluctant to resort to any sort of violence. I mean, he considers it wrong after he basically butchered the woman he loved. So, but it basically deals with him and Mariko talking and learning about each other, and and forming this very genuine connection. You really believe the connection between them, and that I think that was the most integral part of the movie, because she's kind of this very prolific comic book character, and obviously if the relationship between her and Logan didn't work, that could have potentially killed the movie. So basically, up until the last 20-30 minutes is very good. I mean, the movie is very grounded and gritty. There's not really a whole lot of points where it's like, a comic book movie. No, it's fairly grounded, which again is pretty refreshing after a lot of the. Well, it's refreshing in two ways. A, it's not super colorful and comic booky like a lot of the Marvel movies are nowadays. But also it's not all brooding and kind of somber and basically colorless like Man of Steel was. I really didn't like Man of Steel, but it's kind of a nice mix between the two, and it works. I mean, it works for the Wolverine character, but where it really falls apart is the last 30 minutes, where the plot becomes really convoluted and really kind of cartoonish, because all these extra plot threads are coming together, but not really in a nice neat bow, kind of in a jumble, if you catch my drift. I mean it's it I was watching these last 30 minutes going, if they didn't introduce all these other characters and plot threads earlier on in the movie, then this would be a much more enjoyable third act than it is. And not that the third act is completely terrible, because it's not. I mean, you still have your action fix, you still have the comic book action, you still have the acting, but it's a lot harder to swallow, particularly with the Silver Samurai. And when I heard the Silver Samurai was going to be in this movie, I was kind of excited, because who doesn't want to see the Silver Samurai? So, but it turns out the Silver Samurai is the guy in a giant CG robot suit. Yeah. I mean, it's really, I don't have a problem with, yes I do. It's really cartoonish, and when the main bad guy comes out of the suit, he's basically saying, "Oh, this was my plan all along. Don't look so sad, Wolverine," and blah 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 blah, and basically saying really generic bad guy stuff. It takes place in a factory, and they're basically saying, "We're gonna take away your healing ability," and they have him strapped up to a chair. They give the generic Bond villain speech, where "I'm evil, ooh," and and you got all these other characters who some of which throw their motivation completely out the window for the sake of action. Like Will Yun Lee, he's played as this kind of he's played as a bad guy, throughout all the movie, and then all of a sudden he turns into a good guy at the end of the movie. I'm like, what happened? I mean, I suppose you could make the argument that he instantaneously switched sides to make Mariko happy, but I don't know. It's really weak for kind of a nothing character. I mean, he didn't really have much of a chance to develop much personality before this, so I don't know why they're starting now. But it's well shot. I will give it this. The whole movie is very well shot. I mean, you can see the action scenes. There's not a whole lot of shaky cam. And the action scenes are creative. I mean, you see this in the trailers. There's a fight on top of a bullet train. They don't. And the Wolverine's fight with the CGI Silver Samurai. It's okay. I mean, again, it's not as believable because he's fighting a giant CGI monster, which, being a robot monster, should be able to crush him. But I mean, he shouldn't be able to out-muscle a robot. I mean, he clash it. I mean, he matches claws with this big sword. I mean, the Silver Samurai armor and the Silver Samurai sword is made of adamantium. So this actually leads to one element of the movie that was a big risk that I think was much better handled here. I mean, the Silver Samurai heats up his sword and slashes Logan's claws off. And there is no reset button. There is no scene where they're like, oh, we can give you your claws back. For basically at the end of the movie, Wolverine's metal claws are gone, and he is back to the bone claws. And you know what? I am not as angry as I should have been. Because he spends this whole movie trying to find himself. And the fact that he loses what has been his weapon for many, many years, I mean, it seems like an appropriate cost for what he's been through. I mean, he still has the metal skeleton, but I mean, it's a big risk, and I think they handled it well. I mean, they don't completely forget about it. They don't dwell on it, for one thing, but at the same time, they don't go the Man of Steel route. You know, in Man of Steel, when Superman snaps General Zod's neck, and then immediately it cuts to him bringing down a satellite, I think it was, or a plane, whatever, and the movie ends, where it didn't really take any risk in that respect. But here, I mean, he really gets past it. I mean, he really does not view this as a handicap. He kills the bad guy with his bone claws, and he seems like a better person after what he's been through in this movie. I mean, you really feel like he's gone through this arc. You really feel like he's gone through a meaningful change in character. And whether or not the swapping of metal claws for bone claws is a representation of that, I don't know, but I think it works. And as getting back to the action, the action is fairly graphic for a PG-13. I mean, I'm actually surprised at some of the stuff that they got away with for a modern day PG-13, which is usually which basically is the new kiddie rating for action movies. But basically, when he stabs someone with his claws, there is blood on the claws. There's even a scene where he basically performs open heart surgery on himself, and that's a fairly bloody scene. So this is a fairly bloody movie, appropriately so, considering what this guy can do. But it's not exploitative. I mean, it's not like the Texas Chainsaw sequels where it's literally raining blood, or like the Evil Dead remake where it's raining blood and body parts are getting severed. And I mean, it's not like that. They only use as much as they have to. So overall, it's good, but it could have been better. I mean, if they had simplified the story, if they had taken out some of the unnecessary characters, they really could have had a great movie here. But as it stands, considering how bad it could have been, I'm still really happy with the movie that we got. It stays true to the character. The action is a lot of fun. The setting, that's another thing that really adds to the cinematography. You get a lot of shots of Japan. This is not like movie Japan. This is, it's really interesting to see kind of two sides of Japan that you see in the movie. You kind of see the more traditional side of Japan, where they're living in the woods and they're wearing the robes and whatnot. But you also see this kind of technologically savvy Japan, where with all the billboards and it's basically Japanese. It's basically Japan's. They go to Tokyo, which is basically Japan's city of light, and there is a lot of light in that scene. So, like I said, the acting is very good, particularly from Hugh Jackman, although the supporting actors really know how to hold their own too. It makes reasonable use of its setting. It stays true to the character. It provides plenty of very exhilarating action. And it's shot very well. And the direction, this is not quite as strong as James Mangold's other works, like Walk the Line and 3:10 to Yuma. But it does show that he definitely knows how to make an action movie. He knows how, and for never having done a comic book movie before, at least not to my immediate knowledge, he does a pretty good job for his first outing. So, again, if not for that last 30 minutes, which is brought about by a handful of unnecessary plot threads and characters, then this could have been a really great movie. But as it stands, I am still glad that I saw a good Wolverine movie instead of a bad one. This is not bad. This is good. And you know what? That's not too much to ask for in this day and age. Especially considering X-Men 3. I'll leave you with that.